Today on Rooted in Love, I'm really excited to be talking to Sandra Viera, director at Prevention Institute. Sandra's been with Prevention Institute for the past 15 years and has been a longtime partner to the St. Joseph Fund. We'll be talking about community capacity building, our Intersections Initiative, and what the future will bring for our partnership. So we're here today with my good friend, Sandra Viera from Prevention Institute.
Hey, Jason.
Sandra, we've known each other for how long?
Almost 10 years, I think.
Yeah, it goes
It's
by quick.
it's a little bit of a higher number than I thought.
Before kids, before
Before kids, I think you knew me before I
marriage,
was married. It was a whole other life, but a lot has happened in that time,
a
and
lot has happened.
getting to know each other has been
Yeah.
a good part of it.
So, not just you, but the entire organization, Prevention Institute, has been a great partner, an important partner for us at St. Joseph Fund. I thought it'd be good to really go back into time and see how that relationship kicked off. And I'll start a little bit. This was back in 2016, and we were looking to revamp our grant initiatives. We had some more traditional health grant making, funding services, funding programs, which is important and needed. But we had a charge from our board to go deeper, to try to impact not just through services, but through root causes and through understanding what is was really driving the needs, the disparities in our communities. And so I believe we went to the Grant Makers in Health uh, annual conference, and it was at that conference that I bumped into or sat into in a session that was led by your former colleague, Manal Aboleta, um, and just uh, really struck by the work that Prevention Institute was doing, was really engaged in, and it really spoke to what we were trying to do. And I stopped Manal after the talk, and we got to talking and said, "Hey, we should connect," and that became the start. But then, at that point, um, I was introduced to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She did the amazing warm handoff. Well, and like so many good partnership, it starts with a conversation and sparking ideas. And there's something, that was happening, I think, in that room and others in 2016, that was about maybe not doing things the way we had been doing things. I think Prevention Institute was in a similar space, having started in 1997 on this idea that we could focus on prevention, not on necessarily treatment of individuals or focusing on education to prevent illness and injury, but really what are the root causes of those illnesses and injuries that are pervasive, that we continue to see generation after generation. And at the time in 2016, we had been involved with a number of initiatives that brought in different partners, health systems and hospitals, public health departments, schools, businesses, to think about how we could all work on idea of social determinants of health. And we were doing good work and we were really proud of the partnerships and the initiatives we are part of, but we also knew that we were lacking something, that there was an opportunity to center and focus on the communities, on the problem, but more on the solutions. And I think knowing both of us having worked our backgrounds working with grassroots organizations, knowing that that's where the heart and the sort of muscle of that transformation would be, I think kind of led us in from that kind of hallway conversation throughout months of talks and design and dialogue, that we could maybe center these partnerships, these sparks of ideas and innovation in the places that we knew needed transformation. And that's kind of what we replicated for intersections, I think, once we gave it a name. We had a
Yeah.
hard time finding a name for intersections.
Did we? I was trying to remember
It
how
was
we
called
fell in.
Arches. Do you remember
Well,
that
yeah,
for a
Arch's
second?
strategy, and there was this whole kind of like story between Arches. It was like the link from health to wellness. It was
Yep.
like a bridge, and
Yep.
I think we had made a that allusion to like a famed bridge in Europe or something that
Yes.
spoke also to the legacy of the sisters. We were like very we were trying to do too much with
We
the
were
name.
doing a lot. We were doing a lot. And I think at some point we were like, what's at its core, at its foundation, what are we trying to do? And I think we were saying we're trying to address the intersections, right? We're trying to address the intersections of people's lives and communities and build together. And then we were like, oh, great, intersections.
Yeah, when we were in that process in 2016, we were looking at different initiatives, different investment strategies, and models that were led by other foundations. There was the Build Health Challenge. There was CACHI, which is the California Accountable Communities for Health initiative. And all of those were very interesting, and it really took this much more collaborative approach, working across an entire sector. So not just one organization, but many organizations. Um, and we had thought about perhaps joining or co-investing with those.
Yeah.
But then when we had the conversation with Prevention Institute, there was this idea, or really this opportunity to say, "Hey, we're a foundation. We have resources to back this up. Um, Perhaps we should go at this and design something that's a little bit different than those other ones." But we
Yeah.
had talked about learning from what those initiatives were about,
Mm-hmm.
taking those lessons, and then applying a bit more of our um, community mindedness, our approach to community capacity and power building, and also having this relationship we have with the then St. Joseph Health System and now the Providence St. Joseph Health System, having that direct tie to the hospitals and community benefit and the role of a hospital in a community. We thought that was a unique opportunity that perhaps those other initiatives um, didn't have, at least from their start, whereas we could have that from the start. And so I'm just looking back at the formation of this 10 years ago and
Yeah.
where we are now, and we're still doing it.
Yeah.
And it's been a journey, but what's been what are some things that you remember from those early days?
Well, like you said, I mean, there's so many initiatives and ideas that we learned from and built. And Prevention Institute was involved with a few of those initiatives. And we saw the strengths of those efforts, the idea that a collaborative group, a collaborative table, working together, with shared strategies was important. And where we were sort of wondering a bit more was what is the right role for a health system partner, for a hospital? And you were interested in that conversation too. And that's, I think, in our first iteration of intersections, we thought, let's include the hospitals as part of this collaborative table, but not the as the leader, not as the I come in knowing what to do and how to measure it and how to fund, but as a thought partner, as a strategy partner. I mean, the fund had through through the way that you worked built these amazing strong partnerships both with the hospitals and the communities that they served. And to honor that, I think what we did was sort of say, let's come together in rooms not unlike this one and talk and dialogue and debate and talk about why we aren't doing this work in the way that we're all describing: upstream, root cause, addressing structural drivers, creating opportunities to thrive for communities. There are obstacles, there are limitations to it, because otherwise we'd be doing it, right? So many of us working for decades and decades on this. And I think there was something about having that conversation at that time in 7 different communities, knowing and aligning it with the context of those communities, of those partners, just allowed a new set of ideas to come in. And that was different because it was flexible, it was agile, and it was just space to breathe and dialogue and talk. And I just recall being in rooms, I think in Humboldt, it was like 7 folks
Yeah.
together, right? We like managed to bring 7 folks together to talk about this. And in the high desert, it was like 500 people came
Yeah.
together
500.
at night,
Yeah.
right? On a like a Thursday, just to talk about like what can we do together. That was different. That was kind of its own sense of uniqueness that I think we wanted to honor and to keep space for throughout our time together.
Yeah, I think back to those early days when we had open houses to introduce this opportunity to the communities. We knew we wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
We wanted to do something that was not your typical offering from a foundation, and also place community at the center. Very oftentimes, foundations will have a logic model or will have like this theory of change, the big fancy chart with all the arrows and things like
Colors.
that. And ask community organizations to subscribe to this. We didn't do it that way. We really came into it as, hey, we know we have this idea, this idea if we bring groups together and work together and push towards not a result of more programs, but really try to understand how do we get to um, the real root causes, the social determinants or the structural determinants, as we later called it, and get to basically this idea of equity and trauma prevention. Uh, that was the goal, but it was also the journey, so to speak,
Yeah.
and placing community at the center to drive that and allowing community to create the model themselves with us as a partner
Yeah.
and with us as the foundation partner being at the table, but not driving it, not
Yeah.
steering, not being at the head of the table. That was really important for us. And yeah, I remember those meetings in Humboldt and in Napa and Sonoma in Orange County. That 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 one in the high desert really stands out because we walked in and there were hundreds of people in the room. And give a shout out to our former colleague Kevin Mahaney for putting that together at St. Mary Medical Center in the high desert. But that also demonstrated the hunger and the desire for the community for something like this. That it wasn't just about another program or it wasn't just another service, but this
And they pushed
dream.
back, which
Yeah,
was part of what we wanted to happen. Again, I think part of our goal was not to recreate another cycle or another grant that said here's the logic model, here's the indicators of success, here are the outcomes, right? That's prescribed, that's given to a community. This was about, we want to understand your stories, your data, of which we and so many others have asked you to collect over time. Yet what can you do with that? What are the hopes and dreams of your community, as well as what are the limitations and challenges? And I remember sitting at it, after that big night meeting at a smaller table of folks that were saying, okay, you kind of caught our attention, this is interesting. And they kind of challenged us a little bit more, like, why should we do this? Many folks have been around for a while. They have seen grants come and go, um, and they wanted to know kind of what would be different. And the only thing that we could say at that time was, you'll be driving it.
yeah,
So that's the difference there too. And I think that ended up being something that really spoke to um, the opportunity at hand, which is, how do you braid together all of these different pieces and make sense of it for the community at the time. And that was a process, and we, I think, surprised them a little bit when we said, not only are we going to have this sort of pre-phase where we're going to plan and do some of the strategy conversation, but we're going to resource you all to be part of this room. And the only outcome you have to have after 3 to 6 months is a commitment to moving forward in sort of this pointed direction. And that was different. But I
Yeah.
think it meant that we established trust and, helped to ignite something that lives past the 2 to 3 years that, we were able to commit at that time.
Yeah, for me, I look back at it, and I joined the foundation in 2014. And so this is fairly early on in my tenure at St. Joseph Fund. I knew I wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
And like you said, we both have backgrounds working in community at community-based nonprofits, at grassroots community organizations, and we've seen it all.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also, we had our ideas when we were in those places, and
Yeah.
having the opportunity to put those ideas into motion and be resourced for it and share that with community was something that I think we always wanted to do, or we had always hoped that there would be this opportunity when we were working in community. It reminds me that when we first started, we didn't have a prescribed, like, this is the policy, or
Yeah.
we want to result in these programs. We wanted communities to design it for themselves and to dictate the outcome. And you know, when I think back over the time that I've had at the fund, there's always mottos. I say there's these sayings that came out, and one of the sayings was born out of intersections. And the saying that I often go to is, it's not what we do in a grant period, meaning it's not the services
Right.
delivered, the how many people did you reach,
Right.
how many programs, what where a lot of grant investments will count that, or like that's what it's being tracked. It's not what we do in a grant period, but it's what we are building.
Yeah.
What have we built in the time together? And intersections really speaks to that. That there's an acknowledgement that if we are building in this grant period, the true impact is going to be after the grant
Yeah.
is finished,
Yeah.
after the 1, 2, 3, 4 years that we have in a community. It is really about building something that remains, that community owns, that community continues to engage in and through to articulate community power. And intersections was really, uh, for me, uh, that vehicle for that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could think back to, we started out with 7 communities
We
in
did all
California,
across California.
and thinking about what was built in some of those communities.
Yeah. And, I think that was like, one of the questions that came up in the first few months, which is, what do you want to see? What do you want to see out of this? What does success look like? And, we said our success will be what you want for your community. You will define that, you will shape that, you will act on it. Um, what we hope to contribute to this broader vision is a group of connected individuals and organizations that have gotten to know each other in ways that are important to do this tough work, right? This is solidarity work. This is changing not only policies, but this is big work to push against some of the most powerful forces that shapes a society. And to do that, you have to have trust and rapport, and you have to have communication. And so we want to be able to contribute this sort of space and time to be strong, meaningful partners with one another. And that will be this sort of group, this collaborative that has been formed and almost forged under this, initial kind of battle of a policy goal or a effort together, and that will continue forward to do the important work, the long time generational work. I know you've described it so well. And that's what we hope we can contribute to. And that sort of changed the course of the conversations, because it wasn't about what can we accomplish in 12 months or 18 months or 24 months, is how do we use this time to strengthen our foundation and move all of these various policy levers when we're talking about transportation and education and food access and parks and open space and housing. That that was sort of the initial, contribution. And as I think back to the 7 sites, we left it sort of open, right? They were like, well, do you want us to work on parks? And we said, if you want to work on parks. Do you want to work on education? On education, if you want to work on education. At the time, and I think continues to be an issue not only in California but elsewhere, housing was just such a core need and challenge that is so multifaceted and so tied up in not only local, right, legislation and structure, but state and even federal, that it was something that many of the intersection sites gravitated towards. How to provide safe, affordable, accessible housing for residents so that they could live their lives. Um, so many of the sites gravitated towards that, but it was sort of reflective on the uniqueness um, of each area. So housing in the high desert, an area that did experience and experiencing now a higher level of development of developers coming in, of the cities trying to bring in businesses and residents and build up their community. It was very different from an Anaheim and a Santa Ana, in Orange County, that were really dealing with density issues and land use limitations, and how do you connect systems of work with housing, with education. So that stood out to me, of how something like housing could manifest so differently in different communities, and the solutions, the orientations. There's so many different angles that each one took. Um, and being able to be part of those conversations and listen to, Kevin and Miguel and Cesar, who are all part of those communities, or Heidi up north in Humboldt, talk about, wanting to bring people in, and but wanting to ensure that there were jobs that people could come to, and build up the community. Just it was different than what we had done before, than what I had done before. And I think it showcased that intersections would always be an evolving idea. That even the idea we had in 2016, or I think 2018, when we sort of formally funded, would be different. And then, 2020 happened, right?
Yeah.
We had a convening in Oakland all together, February
February.
of
Yeah.
2020. And I just remember in that moment, one of the, leaders there sort of say, most people in my community and communities across California are 1 to 2 paychecks away from not having a place to live. So if anything happens, that drives that, what will we do? And a month later,
Yeah.
that happened.
Yeah. COVID
COVID.
and March 2020.
Yeah. And you and I
And
had moments where we were like, we just got this started and it might disappear, because the urgency and the need were there, right?
yeah. And, I think back then, and we were entering our third year, which was supposed to be the final year of
Mm-hmm.
that initiative, as these 7 communities kind of coalesce their work. But those 7 communities had to, I won't say pause, but they had to pivot
Yeah.
and move. And there was maybe um, a draw, or there was in some places this pull towards, like, well, we need to dedicate all of our work and all of our resources, available resources, including this grant, towards service provision,
Yeah.
towards getting
People fed
people
and
fed,
housed.
or getting people um, access to other supportive services. And I think back, and it wasn't that we weren't supportive of that, but I think we wanted to um, hold the line a bit and say
Yeah.
it's more than that, because what we were doing, where we were building not just 7 community coalitions or 7 partnerships, but we were building these collaboratives who we had hoped uh, could advance community voice. And what we were seeing in COVID, yes, there was an immediate need, and there was immediate need for housing and food assistance and healthcare. Um, but we also saw that there was this, um, in times of disaster, there's often like communities, and those communities that were struggling are the ones that are hit the hardest, but they're also the ones that do not have, or had, did not have the infrastructure of community voice built up.
Yeah.
What we saw with intersections is that we had that, they
Yeah.
had that. And so the support that we were providing, that Prevention Institute and guidance that was provided to these 7 communities was, okay, we have these 7 um, collaboratives that are in existence. Can we now use that infrastructure
Yeah.
to advocate the true needs of the community? We have community voice. And at that time, you had municipalities, you had cities, counties, the state kind of just swooping in and say, this is what needs to happen,
Right.
almost without community voice, without community input. We said through intersections, hold up, listen to the community,
Yeah.
and there's again, what were we building? What did we build that prepared these communities for that moment?
Absolutely. I mean, the communities met that moment. They had that needed time to tend to those needs that were in front of them, right? We were talking about food and shelter and support because they were really scary times. It was a really unknown territory for us all. And it was important to do that. And there was so much of that commitment to building was still there because as much as we knew we were in a scary unknown time, we knew that we would come out of it, that there would be efforts and opportunities to rebuild. And yes, there are things we wanted to rebuild quickly and solidly, but also some of the things that came apart needed to be rebuilt in a different
Mm-hmm.
way. And I think that was the point where we were like, community voice should be part of that. And if we use our voices together, if you use your leadership and expertise as on the ground experts, that's going to help drive our recovery, our rebuilding in more equitable and just ways. And we saw groups coming together. I mean, the Orange County communities came together to, in partnership with the
Mm-hmm.
hospital, to write the supervisors and say, okay, there's going to be money coming down from the federal government. Our priorities are XYZ. We want to be at those tables. We want to be part of co-governance structures to ensure that those funds are going to where they're needed. We saw groups from across the state write letters to in response to the American Recovery Act and say, okay, if we're going to get funds for infrastructure and technology to support us coming back, here's where they need to go. Here's what we need to do. Here are the principles that we have to take. And, you know, as much as we are flexible and I think realistic about outcomes, groups like the one in Napa were able to secure, you know, $3 million from their county's $22 million ARPA allocation to efforts that their community residents had identified and prioritized. And they've been doing that work since we're in 2025. And interestingly, you know, enough, your point about the work and the strategy moves forward, we're now back in contact with a few of the intersections, the California sites, as they're part of a new initiative on Prevention Institute's end to have communities drive public dollar investments, and that only would is possible because they had the opportunity to do these things together under intersections, to come together as a table, as a collaborative, to do some of these important things during really trying times. And now they've really built this expertise and this insight and these relationships that are going to drive them to even, bigger efforts that are going to shape, the health and well-being of their communities and those surrounding it. So I think it's just seeing like it's all connected and we are contributing to this broader vision and approach.
It's all
So
connected. It's
it's
all
all good.
intersecting.
It's all fee. I'm glad we chose
Intersections.
intersections after
Yeah.
all.
I think for us, the last 10 years also marked a period for the St. Joseph Fund where we really embraced the, our identity as a capacity building entity.
Yeah.
I think when the outside looks at our foundation, it's seen as a health foundation
Mm-hmm.
or a healthcare foundation. Um, and traditional healthcare is around clinical services, programs, service provision. And over the last 10 years, it's not that we abandoned that, but I think we moved and we evolved
Mm-hmm.
to see that what our resources could be used for was that building, that
Yeah.
capacity building in community. And I do want to take it back a little bit because when we first started intersections, there was this idea, it's like, well, what is this about? Is it about mental health?
Mm-hmm.
Is it about housing? Is it about education? Is it about diabetes? Is it about
Yeah.
health access to services? And we said, yes, it's about that. But the lesson for us over that time period was you could pick any of those issues: housing, health disparities, educational gaps, achievement gaps, economic development.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see those folks who are in need or affected by those issues, it's the same community that is affected by all the other issues.
Yeah.
So, a community that is dealing with high disparities in diabetes
Yeah.
is usually a community that also has economic development needs. It's also one that there are needs with education and school. Um, those families that live in that area have housing instability or experience that at higher rates than others. And so for us, it was less about the issue,
Yeah.
which I think a lot of our, when we look at philanthropy and grant making, it gets so issue dependent.
Yeah.
With intersections, we were not issue dependent.
Mm-mm.
And I think when a community started to work on a particular issue, yes, there was an outcome that was behind that, or that would it would lead to, but it was almost like this was the the mode of community building.
Yeah.
It was more important uh, that we had an opportunity to build community, for community members to build relationships, to build the infrastructure, to build the collaborative, the working relationship that they had with each other, than the actual policy outcome.
Yeah.
And so, as we think ahead to now, we jumped from 2016 to 2017, 2018, the pandemic in 2020, and now we've had those California sites complete their term with us, and there's, like you said, they're still doing work. Um, we said we need to keep this going
Yeah.
with intersections and with this new footprint that we have as the fund. We were primarily a California um,
Yeah.
focused foundation, but in the last 10 years, again, this evolving, but this growth is coming together with Providence and St. Joseph. Now we're outside of California.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the lessons that we've taken or you've taken from the first iteration of intersections to bring it to where we are now, and maybe share where we are now with
Yes. Where have we taken intersections? when we concluded intersections in 2021, which I will always remember because I think we finished up and I think I was due with my daughter like 3 days later. So she's my intersections baby. But there were so many insights and thoughts and ideas sparking for all of us, right, at Prevention Institute, at the fund, the intersection sites, about sort of what comes next, what else, how do we bring this, how do we tell the story, right? These are 7 communities that are very distinct and unique in their own ways, who have had these pasts, right, of uh, policies and structural drivers that have contributed to their inequities that they were seeing in health and safety, and then they've done all of this powerful work to address them, and their stories continue on. Um, but where there's one community, or 7 in this case, there's others too. And as we were learning about the fun sort of growth across the West Coast and different parts of the country, that aligned a little bit with Prevention Institute's history as a California based organization that has grown to be national. And I think the reason we do that is because, while each community is different, there are underlying principles and opportunities that are the same. So we want to be able to share, to scale where it makes sense to, and to seed in other places. And so the opportunity presented itself as, the fund was navigating its evolution and change of heading north into the state of Washington, right near Seattle and Seattle King County. And I just remember you sort of saying, like, here's sort of our new roadmap. There's this place like Renton, which is just outside of Seattle. And Seattle King County is like a public health like vision, right? They pass so many amazing policies. They have really strong leadership. They have helped set the model and the standard for so many different efforts across the country. But we don't always think about what happens to the communities around these areas, right? And that's the story that you were telling us, that we were listening for and learning, which is, when this incredible change happens, um, communities can get pushed out from those places. And in places across South King County, um, that was the experience, that communities that had been rooted there, communities of color, BIPOC communities, were experiencing the effect of a lot of movement and displacement from Seattle into their areas, driving up housing, replacing locally owned, maybe culturally anchored businesses, changing education systems, transportation systems. And we thought intersections might be a model and a framework to help them navigate this in real time. So in 2024, we began having conversations with groups across South King County, funders, elected officials. We talked to universities, we talked to community based organizations to sort of say, tell us more, tell us about what's needed, where there's an opportunity. And what we realized was, in this community of Renton outside of Seattle in South King County, it was experiencing a lot of these symptoms and effects of displacement, and a need and an opportunity to bring an equity lens, to bring a racial justice lens to what would be needed to go from displacement to equitable development. And what does that look like? And so our work then was beginning to bring together a set of organizations that were highly regarded for their neighborhood work, right? For their local work, supporting residents, youth, older adults, for, helping to establish parks, to do some school reform, but to bring them together to think about what does a safe, healthy, thriving community look like? How do we preserve that piece while also remaining open and inclusive to change and growth that naturally happens? And so that is how we brought together a group of about 5 or 6 community-based organizations in and around Renton, Washington, to begin navigating that journey for themselves. So similarly, started in a room, having some conversation, sharing these stories, um, and that's sparking dialogue
Yeah.
and debate. And that's what we've been kind of in for the last year. And now we get to work with this just amazing group of leaders in Renton who want to do all the things, right? They want to work on education, they want to work on violence prevention, they want to work on land use and parks. And we're saying, okay to it all, but what's the connective tissue behind that? And that's the piece that they're really kind of, in a good way, tangling. They're entangled in that right now. What are the different threads that we can work on? What are the levers that we need to push? And 2025, has a lot of similarity to 2020, both in a public health crisis way, in the calls for racial justice that happened after the murder of George Floyd. And so, how do we honor those calls to action right now, where there is a lot of fear being seated in communities? You can only address fear through hope and resilience and action. And that's what these groups in Renton are all about. So we're pretty excited for
Yeah.
what we're doing.
And I'm excited to work, continue working with you and Prevention Institute. I do want to call out, there was this idea that in King County and Renton, it was about anti-displacement.
Mm-hmm.
But then we said, no, it's really about equitable development,
Mm-hmm.
healthy equitable development. So it's reframing it.
Yeah.
But also
That's
with that,
power in that, right?
there is power, but it's also calling out, hey, this is what this is about.
Yeah.
It's not a reaction, but we're trying to be proactive.
Yeah.
Um, in the same way, we look at these efforts as capacity building.
Mm-hmm.
This is, for the fund, we have capacity building in different domains with the individual, with individual nonprofit organizations, and collaboratives slash neighborhoods. But even then, the term capacity building kind of just, it leaves a lot off the table when you just read those words. Um, we added healing centered
Mm-hmm.
capacity building, because what is this really about? We're not just building capacity for, to go after grants or
Yeah.
to have a sustainable nonprofit organization that then goes after more funding or whatever. That's part of it, yeah. But really, we're talking about healing. We're talking about healing and um, healthy relationships, organizational development, or organizational relationships that are rooted in healing. Um, that's what I see also in the work in Renton.
Yeah.
We had groups that um, kind of knew each other. They
Yeah.
didn't know each other. We're spending time so the relationships can really be built. But one, that these relationships are not transactional, that it's really rooted in this desire to heal the community, to build capacity that continues to nurture and heal our communities. I'm wondering if you're seeing, or what you're seeing right now, since you're closer to the work
Yeah.
with those communities.
I mean, I think that's exactly right. And I remember this in working kind of more in a place-based way too, which is you're doing so much important work on the day to day. You're maybe in the same meetings and conversations with different organizations, but unless you take the time, and find the time and kind of carve out the time to sit down and really ask one another what you're about as an individual. And then we talk about origin stories a lot in intersections, right? Like, what's your origin story? And it begins with the individual. What has drawn them? What are their values? What are their commitments and passions and interests? You will find only a few dots between that individual and why they're in the organization they're in. Maybe it's because they just, they see future and hope in youth. And so they work at a community center and they are doing after school programming to keep kids engaged and connected and valued, after school. Or you see groups that are thinking about land trusts and land banks and like preserving land, because land is power, right? For communities that will come after them. And you see these origin stories, but you don't always have the time to talk about them. And then to say, well, what is the opportunity of combining the efforts and the strengths and commitments of your organization with my organization? How does that get us to a bigger vision and this idea of equitable development or a healthy, healed community? That we don't create the space for that. We don't create the time for it. We don't resource that, right? And that's what we mean by capacity, is the capacity to meaningfully partner and engage and work together, not just work alongside one another, but to work thoughtfully, strategically together. And that I am seeing in South King County and in the groups who are getting to know one another as people, as organizations, and then sort of as like mobilizers, of agents of change, of like, wow, the people that we've been waiting for are maybe like this group here, and we can be part of moving these ideas into action and to leverage, our standing in the community, our work with community leaders, our relationships with elected officials. Like, they should be coming to us. We shouldn't be going to
Yeah.
these folks individually. Like, the power is in the collective. Um, and that's the opportunity that the team at Prevention Institute is really interested in supporting and fostering, and coaching and encouraging them through that. And we get to bring in other partners to support them on that and to think about framing. Framing is so important. Narrative storytelling is so important, not at the end of a grant or of an effort, but at the beginning. So things like op-eds or getting blog posts out, getting these stories out there now is part of a longer term trajectory to growth and sustainability. So I'm excited for what South King County is going to do. There's a lot of ideas sparking for them, but I think they see this opportunity to be a collective together, and that's going to be impactful beyond what we'll be able to measure in the next 2 years.
Yeah, and it's a relationship.
Yeah,
It's not just like here's money and here's the next 12 months and go and do,
yeah,
but we're really talking about longer term, over the next 3 years, 4 years,
yeah.
and building from there and building this long term relationship. So what's next? What's next for intersections? And then follow up with what's next for Prevention Institute?
Oh, that's exciting. I think what's next for intersections is continuing to share the story thus far, to engage others in like conversation too, right? Because there's other amazing work that's happening. So how do we learn from one another? How do we also connect our efforts together to work collectively? There are a lot of challenges and obstacles that we're facing as a society on so many fronts right now, and we all have to be pointed in the same direction and working collectively to get there. And I think we only do that by getting to know one another, by sharing what we know and sharing what we don't know, and just recognizing that we don't know everything.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big, a big no-no, right? You don't go into a grant saying like, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how
Yeah.
it's going to turn out. But we want to invite that, because that is what drives innovation. And I think what we have tried to do in partnership with the fund, with you and your colleagues, is say we want evidence to inform our work and our approach, but it's not going to drive it because we're about building innovation. We're about building kind of the new models and sharing those models and frameworks out there. So that's what's next for us, is to continue to support our South King County partners. We're really, for a number of reasons, committed to what recovery and rebuilding looks like in places that have been affected by climate fuel disasters, like what happened earlier this year, that affected uh, Altadena and Pasadena in particular, um, and wanting to do so in a really thoughtful, mindful, and respectful way. But we know that these types of disasters are not going away anytime soon. And we want to be part of the prevention to them, and the rebuilding effort. You can bring a prevention lens to rebuilding. I think sometimes we think prevention and recovery are at opposite sides of the dial. They can go hand in hand. Yeah, because if we're rebuilding, if we are reestablishing things, we can build it with a prevention lens, with an equity lens. So we're doing that exploration. And I think for Prevention Institute is, continuing to have, I think, this thoughtful, bi-directional kind of authentic partnership, with the fund and all of your colleagues, and to just help share our story and our insights, to others that are in the same place, and thinking about things. So what about for you? I'm curious what you see for those things.
Everything.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
I was just reflecting back 10 years
Yeah,
together, the relationship between Prevention Institute and the fund in 10 years, and then going on. And that's something that when I look at the work of the fund, we can't do it alone.
yeah,
We we want to be a partner. We can't do it alone. And I think it's going into places, seeking out partners who have similar values or similar visions or dreams for our communities. And Prevention Institute has been that partner for us. And so when I see what's next, yeah, it's taking all the lessons that we've had, lessons, little strategies that worked in one community and bringing it to another, the openness to learn about new communities,
yeah,
to modify what worked in somewhere else and bring it here, but with that local flavor, that local innovation, continuing to work that way. And so I see a lot. I see a lot of us sharing our story. I see a lot of us. We were talking about writing a book about
yeah.
this. Certainly highlighting our community members. Um, Maybe coming off, spinning off this podcast. We could do a podcast on our own.
Totally.
We talk about music. Besides the work, we have a good working
Music,
relationship. We talk about music,
film,
travel.
yeah, all these things are
Yeah,
interconnected, right?
yeah, and that's what we're talking about. This is not just a partnership based on the work, but
Yeah.
there's values, there's community
Yes.
that's there, and that's what we're trying to build, and that's who we are.
Yeah. Likewise, I think community is what we're each about, what each of our organizations are about, and we know there's a lot of folks out there that hold that same value and principle, and we just want to keep doing this work together, and spend the next 10 years changing the world.
Yeah,
That's kind of the path forward.
yeah.
So
This is
thanks for
great.
being our partner on that too.
Well, thank you, and thank you for today. It's been
Thank you.
fun.
This is fun.
Yeah, we'll talk more. We'll
Yeah,
talk more soon.
totally.
We'll
I
talk
like that.
about food. Our next podcast will be about food.
Yeah, some reviews. That would be nice.
So thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Jason.